Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Swedenborgian online community gathering, discussion, and interview. We are so happy to be your interfaith Swedenborgian online spiritual community. So thank you for connecting whenever you do. Special thanks go out to those of you connecting with us live. We're trying a new thing tonight, and we ran into some tech hiccups. We may still be having tech hiccups, so let us know what you can and can't hear. It'll help us figure out whatever we're doing going forward. So appreciate you willing to do that. And greetings to our wonderful guest, Kurt Fekete, the youth director of the Swedenborgian Church of North America. How are you doing tonight, Kurt?
Great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. So you're the youth director of all the youth of the Swedenborgian Church of North America, technically. Tell me about your position and what.
Yeah, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. I serve all the youth, but not only the youth, but also youth leaders, ministers, clergy, anyone who has people in their congregation under the age of 18. I'm there to help. To set up whatever needs to be set up, to help with startup youth groups, to help with any programming, even Sunday school. If for the older kids, I'm happy to help with that as well. But my primary role is serving the denomination and holding retreats and helping camps with youth.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's your primary role, but you're willing to connect and uplift pretty much anyone, aren't you, Kurt?
Absolutely. Absolute.
That's great. I've been told that our Facebook feed is iffy, but I hope. Oh, yeah. Sound around is jumpy. So how about we do this? Sorry, Kurt, just 1 second. Being an online community, I think this is part of our life's blood, and learning process, tech issues. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to end the live video for Facebook, and then hopefully that helps everyone's connection. Unfortunately, but that's the way things work. Were you going to say something?
All churches have their challenges.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and without friction, we don't really grow, do we? Kind of like the pearl and the clam.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have plenty in youth work as well.
I bet. Yeah, tell us about some of the challenges of youth work.
Well, I guess it's a little bit similar to what you're experiencing here, only your issues are tech, but they're similar in that you are trying to connect people around the North America and beyond, if possible, right? And I'm doing the same thing, only I'm trying to do it physically, with the constraints with time and space. So the most difficult thing I think in youth work is logistics, is getting everybody together, getting people in the same place is expensive, it's challenging, and is probably the most difficult part of youth work.
Yeah, that's tough. And I would think that it's even tougher maybe now with the connected world and so many distractions out there.
I'm not sure. It might be. In some ways, it's easier because everybody is connected. So at least driving vans around the country, at least everybody has cell phones, and of course, since the vans are usually filled with teenagers. That's the population that knows how to use electronics better than most. So often if there's an issue on the road, I'll hear it from a teen before I'll hear it from a driver or an adult supervisor, because the teens are so connected and are so good at using technology.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to hear. And it makes sense that it could also help with your connecting, with your programming. And
yes.
So how did you get into youth work? Did it start at a moderately early age for you? What was the call there, Kurt?
Yeah, well, that's a perfect transition, because I actually started youth work as a volunteer van driver. Of course, I was born and raised Swedenborgian, and I was involved in retreats as a youth myself. But when I aged out, and when I went through my college years, I felt an urge and a calling to volunteer and help out people doing the youth work. And so I started out as a van driver. I used to drive the van from the Midwest to the East Coast. And that was my start.
Yeah, so you started by really pulling people together, and then it started manifesting in many ways. Because I'm sure you still drive a van pretty regularly.
I do. Although I do drive a van, and I continue to drive. But as I started as a van driver, I continue to appreciate van drivers and people who move teens around more and more and more every year. It's the most critical and the least appreciated job there is. And retreats and all these close bondings that these teens have would not happen without the adults and the volunteers and leaders that truck these teens all over the country and beyond.
Well, yeah, great thanks go out to folks driving people around and connecting them. I have my own kind of history with church vans when I used to be a youth in the Salvation Army. In fact, my youth work in terms of leadership was mainly in my teens. For whatever reason, maybe for good reason, but our older teens tended to take on leadership roles in our youth program. In fact, I think all the leaders in the youth program were 20 and below for a while at least. And yeah, bringing people together, picking people up was a key way that the Salvation Army at least brought kids together, brought everyone together. I don't know how many people would have shown up without those bus drivers, those buses.
Absolutely, and we had a similar start. We had junior staff that was working when I first started, when I was younger in my 20s, and we had junior staff. We don't do that any longer, but we do allow junior staff, people who are 18 and over, to work with our Splats group, which is our younger group. And because the only reason I don't do it anymore is I've adopted the 5-year rule, which is leaders have to be 5 years older than the oldest attendee. The oldest youth that's there. So for the teen retreats, they have to be 23.
Oh, great. What was some of the thinking behind that rule? Curious.
Well, that's sort of a universal policy around a lot of denominations, a lot of different faiths have adopted it. What they generally found was it turned into, there are two issues that where things can go awry. And one of them is college age people coming back, sophomores, juniors, coming back from college, and it just ended up sort of being a big college reunion. Oh. And the second issue that can happen is that sort of a control issue, where if you're only a few years older, your maturity level and your abilities are very similar to the people you're supervising. So there's conflict of control and power sometimes. And we found that a lot of times there was some issues on both ends with teens saying, well, why should I listen to this person? They're no older than I am, or it was just the whole thing in general works out better to have a little difference in age.
That makes a lot of sense. Let me just shift gears for a second and
Sure.
say to some of the folks that are connecting live, we are taking questions from you all as well. And I was noticing that some of you never connected, at least one of you, and you said good night, so good night, Mark. But for the rest of you who can hear us, great, aces. And so Kurt, you said that you have a group called Splats, which I believe is a younger group.
Right.
And then also 13. The SCYL, is that correct?
Correct, which is 13 to 18. There's an overlap year, the magic year of 13, where you can be in both. splats and SCYL, and I love that. I love that they can stay back and they can mentor and help the young 10-year-olds just coming on, but they can also see their friends who are older and have moved on to the teen retreats. And I love the magic year of 13, and I think that a lot of the youth love it too. Plus, they get double the retreats, which can be a little overwhelming. That makes it almost one every month. But they can pick and choose what they like to go to then.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, the overlap year would be fun.
It is great fun for them.
So you mentioned you have a couple retreats during the summer and other times as well. Tell us about your retreats and what goes on there. I'm curious.
Yeah, most of the retreats happen during the school year. So basically, when everybody else is breaking and when you're enjoying your life with your family, I'm working. Whenever there's a break from school, we get together, and usually at a retreat center, sometimes at a church, but often at a retreat center, and we gather and we live in community. We try to make it as close to a heavenly community as we can, and we have issues and we have problems, but we're there in a safe, sacred place to listen and learn and from each other, work together and live in a community. And we're usually centered around a theme. If it's a teen retreat, it's often selected by the youth officers, and we sit and have discussions, and we bring in various ministers to present different sessions on the topic of choice.
Oh, great. Yeah, so you have different speakers, and it sounds like you're trying to create a good space for people, youth, to connect and feel safe and heard.
Absolutely. And we have fun too. I mean, obviously, what's a retreat without fun? We go on outings. We have lots of downtime. One of my favorite things is when a youth will come to me and say they're bored, because that's a good thing, right? It means that they can look for something new and something different and something fun to do. It doesn't happen that often, but there's nothing better than boredom to inspire and to drive some exciting new adventures. Yeah, they're always fun.
So do you find you kind of use that kind of approach a lot? So you hear what may seem to some people as negativity, but you actually see opportunity in those moments?
Absolutely. I think that's true. I think that's a good thing for everyone to try to practice or learn. I mean, if there's an issue with someone that's not connecting, or then there's probably something that they're doing themselves that they might be able to work on, or something they might be able to change. Why do you feel bored? What is it that is boring you? Is it because you're in a different space and you're outside? You're not at home playing Fortnite. You're not plugged into your device, and that's maybe something you're missing. And what can you do differently? How can you connect? And always opportunities in things that appear to be negative.
Yeah, would you say that's a vital part of what you meant when you said we try to create a heavenly space?
Yeah, I think that is. I mean, I don't believe that there is boredom in heaven, and I don't believe that negativity would exist. But I think in creating a space that's sacred and heavenly, one of the most important things to do is to make sure that each person in the community is comfortable and is happy and is in a place where they feel protected and loved and cared for.
Well, you clearly have a certain idea about what it means to be heavenly, and I think a lot of Swedenborgians do. But maybe for those listening who may not be Swedenborgian, how would you define it? I think I've already heard a good bit of how you would describe heavenly.
Inclusiveness, welcomeness, and this is particularly relevant in talking about youth and teenagers, right? Because these are people in transition. These are people going through physical change, through emotional change all the time. And so the most important thing that they can receive is love and inclusiveness and feel welcome and cared for. So one of the beautiful things about this faith, about the Swedenborgian Church, is that we practice that. We welcome all. It doesn't matter whether you're Catholic or whether you're agnostic or whether you're Presbyterian or Lutheran. And many of our teens are or go to worship in a different church. But I have never heard any of them say that they didn't feel welcome in our church going through a retreat or any kind of event or activity.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's been my biggest surprise in my kind of relatively few years in the Swedenborgian Church of North America, our denomination, how welcoming and supported I've felt. And it's always to such an extent that I'm surprised. Like, I grew up in different churches, the Baptist church where my grandfather was a minister, and the Salvation Army after that, and also participate in other religious groups thanks to my father. But I think the Swedenborgians, bar none, have been just amazingly supportive and welcoming. What do you think it is? Yeah, you said we try to create that space, but yeah, what is it? Why do we try to do that? Is it because for us that's receiving more divinity, or how would you put it?
I don't know. Maybe partially because we're so small, perhaps. We can't afford to lose anyone. It's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, it's deeper than that. I think it's part of our core theology. I think that Swedenborg, right? He came out and clearly said that you don't have to follow X, Y, Z to get to heaven. That it's an individual path and an individual journey, and each journey, has its own hills and its own valleys, and that we appreciate each other and each other's journey. We help each other on our journey, and I think that's part of our theology. Is not that you have to do certain you don't have to go through can't a certain hoop or whatever to get in, right? You just have to be a good, kind, loving person and live a good, charitable life.
Wonderful, wonderfully put. And for those curious how that idea, that open and affirming approach connects to Christianity, well, I'll just say very briefly, Emanuel Swedenborg believed that God, Yahweh, came down as Jesus Christ and essentially put some things right for us and also just pulled us closer, essentially, in his life and continuing life. But as Kurt just beautifully described, Swedenborg, despite that high Christology, thought we could all connect to that divinity, whatever we call her, through our different faiths, through our different journeys, and that's why I tend to call the Swedenborgianism that we share an interfaith Christianity.
Absolutely.
Great. I want to know more about the kids groups. So Splats, SCYL, you have youth retreats. What do you think the youth get from those retreats? What kind of feedback have you gotten over the years?
Wow. Just that's the, and that's often that you don't receive it when they're teenagers often, you don't always receive the thanks and the gratitude that you get when they're older. But when it's incredible how many people have come back to me, or even before I was involved in this work, how many people have said that retreats and our church camps have literally saved people's lives. People have come back and said they changed who they were for the better as a person, and people have come to me and said that there were parts of their life where they actually lived almost retreat to retreat. I looked at it as sort of a power boost, where I don't know. I'm a 70s kid, so I played with Hot Wheels. And they had this thing called a turbo booster. I don't know if you remember what it is, but they had this orange track that went around and around, and there was just two wheels in this power booster that shot the car out. And then it would slow as it gathered around, around the track, and then it would barely make it back to the power booster, and then it would shoot it out again. And that's sort of, I guess, my analogy to how retreats work, is there are many, many people who feel that even though these are friends they might only see a half a dozen times in a year or less, they feel closer and they feel more in touch with the people in that community than they do anyone else, more than their school and sometimes even more than their family. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to be a youth director and to hear people come back and say things like that.
That's really powerful.
Very.
I can relate with those kids. Unfortunately, I didn't grow up in the youth with the Swedenborgian church, but I always found, especially the retreats, just that human connection with those friends, and the friendships that you develop always seem so much deeper than most of my friendships at school and other places. And you're right, it's like I would call someone my best friend who I only saw a couple times a year.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable in a way. And I guess technology does help because they have their own chat rooms now and their own groups, and they're able to talk and be connected. But still, there's still no substitute for gathering time together for a weekend or a long weekend for 3 or 4 days together just to hang out. And it really makes a difference in so many kids' lives. And it keeps me motivated and keeps me driven to continue to do what I do. I just love it. And I love to hear the stories later of how it's helped people. Just sometimes it's hard just getting by, especially as a teenager, and just knowing that you have a group that cares for you no matter what, unquestioning, just loves you for who you are. It's very powerful.
Yeah, so in practice, that loving someone for who they are, especially with youth, how does that manifest itself in all the maybe traumatic moments or the moments where they're dealing with trauma? Is it just holding space and listening, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, and it's amazing how the teens heal each other. We're involved as adults, and we're involved to give them guidance and to help them with theology and to help them with some big questions that they have. But as far as the emotional growth and just sometimes just middle school survival itself, they really count on each other, and they can share anything with each other, and it is like a big caring community and family, and they heal each other. They really do. And we're there to oversee it. We're there to help them, but it's amazing how much they can do on their own, given the sacred environment that's safe and healthy and comfortable.
Would you say that maybe us adults, if we call ourselves that, could learn something from not only the youth, but also maybe the structure of these retreats? I know some people go on retreats, and there's a few times that we all gather in the summer, at least some people in the denomination. And would we benefit from more of that kind of structure continuing in our lives? It sounds like something pretty nice. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, and just this weekend, I know at Elmont New Church Assembly, there is a women's retreat going on that is structured very similarly to our teen retreats. And I know a lot of the women really, really look forward to that. And absolutely, I think adults could use a spiritual community that meets regularly and grows together. I think it would do us all a great deal of good. And you can talk to some of the volunteers that come in, some of the adults that have participated in retreats, and they come out of the retreat changed. They come out different. They come out better. And they've told me, numerous volunteer adults have come back to me and told me, they kind of go in thinking, well, it's a duty, it's a task, I'll just get through it. And then they leave just saying, wow, that was really special. That was powerful. And I had no idea, how important something like this could be in my life. And that's just working there, as a cook or as a supervisor, a chaperone, or a van driver. But I believe, yes, adults should be more involved, and it would be really nice to have more opportunities like this for everyone.
Yeah, I have a very limited experience with the youth directly in the Swedenborgian church, besides the few kids who've been coming to church here in Kitchener. But I was the boys' dorm dad, I think it's called, at Freiburg New Church Assembly.
At Freiburg, great.
Yeah, at the camp there, which is a lot of fun. And I can't say, it wasn't a heavy week of, scheduling between me and them. Really, I was there to keep them safe and hold space, etc. But I think there's something nice about connecting with youth, but also just having that excuse to go to camp. And it didn't help that the cost was reduced. Thanks to that.
It definitely helps. It's a great experience. And one great thing about teenagers is they speak their mind. They don't hold back, and they're pretty easy to read. They know what they're not hiding a lot, as far as, if they're not happy, they'll let you know. If they're not comfortable, if they're not in a good place, or if what you're saying isn't true to them or doesn't make sense, they'll call you on it right away. Whereas an adult might just sit quietly and say, well, I'm not going back there, or I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. I think in teens, I've found are more genuine and honest in many ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to turn to our Chatsy for a moment and share some things that our wonderful friend and member Albert has commented, if I can get to it. Yeah, so he says, Kurt's youth presentations during the past 2 annual conventions are quite memorable and inspiring.
Oh, so, thank you, Albert.
Yeah, and it is nice to hear those updates, and it's also wonderful seeing you with the youth during those events, giving their presentations and their performances, which I think Albert also comments on. What's that like, getting the youth to perform in front of a crowd of folks?
It's phenomenal, and it's hard to believe, but many of the youth have come back to me and said it's their favorite part of convention, preparing worship service. I mean, how often do you hear that? I mean, more fun than going to an escape room or going to an amusement park. Or they really love putting effort into putting something together that they can be proud of. And they love being able to deliver something meaningful and something that people can get something out of, and something that they can really put their heart and soul into. And they do put their heart and soul into it. And it's a lot of work. It's incredible how much work goes into. I don't think many people realize that this is, usually we only have maybe 48 hours to pull together a 40-minute, 45-minute worship service involving music and involving theatrics and involving set design and props. And it can be stressful, it can be difficult, but many, many times teens have come back and said it's their favorite part of convention.
Wow, yeah. I've seen a few now, at least a couple of the youth presentations, and they are really creative, really inspiring and beautiful. And it sounds like, and it seems like when I've watched them, that it's essentially, their personal expression, their art in action, and in the various ways that each of them is somewhat comfortable doing. It's really cool. It's great.
That's exactly what it is. Some people are shy. They don't want to be in front of the audience. They work on props and they do an excellent job. We have, AV and tech specialists that all they want to do is just work on, putting together the audio video. Everybody has a little place. Even messengers. Sometimes it's a team is a messenger, because, you know, usually once we decide what we're going to do, we break up into pods of 3 or 4 people and they go off and do it. And sometimes we get a team that just wants to run back pod to pod and figure out what everyone's doing and piece it together and what order it should be and how it should flow. And it's just everybody, it's a little bit like heaven that way, right? As Swedenborg describes our heavenly communities as all working together. You know, they each have their own individual gift and their talent, but it all comes together to make something work out well.
Yeah, I love Swedenborg's explorations of all the different communities working to kind of create heaven, and it sounds a lot like that. It also reminds me from, you know, the Bible, those quotes around us being part of you know, the body of Christ, like essentially different organs do different things. And,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's really cool. So going forward, what are you looking forward to? What's in the calendar for you, Kurt?
Oh, we've got some big plans. Summer's coming, so we have all of our summer camps. We have our Memorial Day retreat at Elmont in the end of May, and then our summer camps. But most of all, we're looking forward to our big trip to England. We're doing our international youth camp again. After, I think, 6 years, we're going back. And we've got, I think, 14 teenagers signed up, and we have 2 chaperones, myself included. And we're going to Purley Chase, which is a retreat center in England. And we're going to join up with other teens from that area. And we're going to do a summer camp. And it's going to be on the Book of Revelation, so it's going to be wonderful.
Oh, that's epic!
It is.
I think it fits that you're making quite the journey to review Revelation, which is quite the trippy journey.
It is. It really is. Well, we're going to go to a castle too, I hope. Can't go to England without visiting a castle, and we're going to take a tour of London, so we'll get some sightseeing in too. But last time we went, what we really loved was just being able to just hang out with fellow Swedenborgians and like-minded people in faith, and just learning about what it's like to live in a different country. And it's just a wonderful experience, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I bet it's very enriching. I'm curious. What's that?
Yeah, a lot of work too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that work. It's much needed, and it sounds quite inspiring to the rest of us, especially those of us who look longingly at trips and maybe don't feel like we have time for vacation. Well, what if we were to couple all those things together, a spiritual retreat, etc., self-care? Maybe it would be easier to digest and get to. That would be great.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So I'm curious, you mentioned looking at Revelation, and it was actually Swedenborg's book on the Book of Revelation, exegesis, which just means he essentially looks at every verse of Revelation and looks at the inner meaning and how it speaks to people's lives. But to him, it's so interconnected with the rest of the Bible and his visions of heaven. The symbolism is similar, right? He calls it correspondence, and says that's how the parables of Scripture work. And as I was reading this, I wasn't really, despite growing up in the Christian church, I wasn't really looking at the Bible as Scripture. When I got into Swedenborg, I really got into him for some of the big ideas, but it wasn't until I read that book, and it was this kind of crazy process, its own journey for me to say, oh, what Swedenborg is saying about this verse and connecting it to the rest of the Bible really plays out with how the Bible is using these phrases. And I'm starting to believe that there is this deeper meaning. There is this holy correspondence in books of the Bible, at least, maybe even other books, as Swedenborg says. And what is that like with the kids? Like, do they resonate at all with looking at Scripture from a Swedenborgian perspective? Do you find Swedenborgian theology like speaks to something real in them?
Absolutely. In fact, that might be one of the best things that our Swedenborgian theology gives to the youth, is that it makes sense. You know, a lot of people struggle with the Book of Revelation, and if you look at it literally, it there's a lot of struggles there. It's difficult book to understand, but if you can make sense out of it through correspondence and through looking at how it relates to the whole story, how it fits, you know, and being the final book of the Bible, it should make sense, right? It's the conclusion, it's the end. So, and the kids really understand. They see it. It helps them understand how meaningful the Bible is, how relevant it is, and how it still can work to us, you know, for us today. It's not just a dusty old book on a shelf, you know, that came from their great grandparents. It's something relevant. It's alive. It's meaningful. It has purpose. And if you can relate the stories in the Bible to life and help it and allow it to improve your life, it makes a huge difference. And I think the kids see that.
That is awesome. That's great to hear. I want to quote Albert again for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it might connect on something we already talked about for a moment, but I want to share his thoughts. The excitement of the youth to participate in the fairly large crowd viewership is wonderful. Presenting in front of crowds can be a psychological challenge for adults, but Kurt's work, getting youth into presenting early in life, is great.
Yeah, and there are, it's funny, there are definitely teens that just, I had a teen with this absolutely angelic voice. She had the most beautiful voice, but just absolutely refused to be on stage in front of an audience. But the voice was just so beautiful, there was no way we couldn't include it. So we kept inching her back farther and farther away, and we arranged almost the entire convention worship service around. It started with the lights completely out, and with her way off side stage, so that you couldn't see her at all, and she just sang in this dark room, and it was just beautiful. And as it turned out, this wasn't scripted this way, or we didn't plan it this way, but at the end of the service, she walked out from sort of behind the curtain and kind of just slowly strolled out so that everybody could see her. And I didn't ask her to do that. We didn't plan for her to do that. We said, no, just stay back there. Totally cool. We just want to hear your voice. But she felt just inspired, you know, and it wasn't rehearsed that way or anything. She just came out and did it. And it is hard to be on stage. I don't think I could have done a lot of the things these teens are doing at that age. I was way too shy back then.
Yeah, there's so much to learn from this process, your process with the kids and them sharing. And I feel like that worship service is maybe just the beginning of the wisdom and inspiration that we can find with the youth. So maybe sometime in the future, if you feel like creating more content throughout the year, I don't know. It's my job to offer this up, but I would love to help promote it on the Swedenborgian online community. Maybe one of many places I'm sure that would love to share. But I'm sure the youth, they're connecting. It's as you said, it's tough to pull something like that together, even given a month, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really, really cool what you do. And I'm curious, when you started driving your bus with the youth, where were you at spiritually? Like what's your journey to working with the youth, and your spiritual journey as well, throughout this time?
Yeah. Well, I started out terrified, of course, of being, I didn't really picture myself back then. I think I started driving in my earlier mid-20s, early 20s, I think. And at that time, I just wanted to help out a good friend of mine. The Reverend Steve Pultz was in Detroit. He was leading the youth at that time, and he just needed somebody to help out. And one thing, I love driving. I always have. And so that was something I could do. So it started out that way. And I would talk with him, and he was such a great leader for children, teens, adults. He was great with everyone. So we'd sit down and we'd talk a lot, and I got a lot of inspiration, a lot of knowledge from Steve. We spent a lot of time together. And as I volunteered, I, took on little bits and pieces at a time. I could still remember my first session. I led a session with my wife, and I pretty much made her do all the work. I was shy, and I was off to the side, and it was a session on, I think it was on the spirit of yoga or something. And I'm not much for yoga, but she's pretty good, and she led something, and I remember doing this interpersonal thing where they had to pick an object up that was near them. They were sitting out in the grass, and they would pick up a stick or a rock, and they would look at it and try to find the meaning in that. It was really kind of trippy, and it was really fun. But that was my first real introduction to doing anything spiritual. And wow, that's so long ago now, 30 years ago. And it was a slow, long process, but gradually I grew in my own spiritual comfort and my own, abilities, and being able to talk and present and lead by learning and reading and discovering on my own. But it was no short journey. I was a chemical engineer. I was working in chemistry, and it took me a long, long time to transition over to truly love doing what I do now.
That's so wonderful. And yeah, what a journey you've made, the progress in terms of being able to share and uplift. It is tough. I think we have to be patient with ourselves in working with folks, especially if we feel called to the kind of work that you do and many do, connecting with people and supporting them spiritually. What would you say is one of the biggest challenges of the work or of your journey so far?
Trying to think now. I guess it's, I have to keep reinventing, and I have to keep learning. And the world is changing so quickly, and so many things happen, so fast now, that I have to do my best to still be relevant and still try to, I understand our theology in this church, and I have a pretty good understanding of the Bible, but my job is to bring that to the youth. So the challenge is for me to stay contemporary and to stay relevant and current with what's going on with a teenager today. It was easier when I was in my 20s and 30s. When I was your age, it was, I wasn't that far removed. But now, I have to really work at it. Helps that I have two daughters, and they help me along. And every retreat I learn as much from the teens as they learn from me, probably more. So the challenge for me is to continue to make sure the message that I bring and that the other ministers coming in who volunteer at retreats and camps bring is relevant to a teen today, because their life is very different from the life that I lived, or even the life you lived as a teenager. It's changing so quickly. So continuing to stay relevant and continuing to stay meaningful and doing good work that helps them through their life.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense that would be quite a challenge. Sounds like one of the key ways you learn is by listening and paying attention to the youth, who you said you probably learn more than they do in one of those retreats.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I can just be quiet, be still. And I guess that's how we learn from God too, right? We shouldn't always talk to God. When we pray, I don't believe we should always have requests and always have thanksgivings, but we should just sit silent and allow God to talk to us too. And I think that's true with working with teens or working with anyone, right? Is the ability to listen.
That's right on. And it's funny. I should say it's a coincidence, or I would say if we didn't believe in providence. I guess there are similar things. The sermon for the online community this coming week from Reverend Dr. George Dole is called "Be Still." So you hit the nail on the head, Kurt. Thank you.
Hey, whenever I can be in the same room or even the same country as Reverend Dr. George F. Dole, I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
What a wonderful soul, and an incredible intellect. What a great man he is.
Yeah, and we are quite blessed to be able to share his sermons on the community's webpage at swedenborgiancommunity.org. Get my plug in. Reverend Dr. George Dole, I was in his last class of exegesis. Speaking of exegesis, I'm glad I've already defined it, but it was his quote unquote Swedenborgian Biblical Exegesis 101, and it was a year long. And it was the last time he taught it, because I think he's in his early 90s, which is amazing.
He's getting up there. I'm not sure of his exact age, but yes.
Yeah. Well, if you don't know this, you probably do, being where you are. But hopefully we can have George Dole on sometime, because he's gotten new cochlear implants, so he hears a lot better. You're shaking your head. Have you had a chance to chat with him at all?
I haven't had a chat to recently, but one of the scariest moments I've had, this was maybe 2 years ago, is I was asked to lead a worship service in Bath, Maine, where George was in attendance. And what I didn't know going into it was that I had he mic'd me, and he put it on my collar, and I basically had a direct line into George Dole's head. and really all he could really hear was me talking, and I was absolutely terrified, because I'm like, oh no, this guy to me is, just an incredible, brilliant thinker and theologian, and to be mic'd directly into his mind was just kind of overwhelming to me. But he said I did okay. He said I did a fine job. He's a very humble soul also, thankfully.
Yeah, he is. That's cool. Yeah, so you a little shocked to know that you were whispering in his ear, but
Exactly. But there was one thing that got me through it. I had a mute button.
Good.
So if I wanted to, I could shut him off too. I never used it, but it brought me some comfort.
Yeah, that's a little intimidating.
That's intimidating.
Well, it's so cool to hear about your work and your journey, Kurt. Unfortunately, we got started a little late, and I don't want to hold you too far past the hour. But I'm curious if there's any parting reflections or words that you'd like to share for folks around working with youth, around your work. Or what have you?
We've covered a lot. I feel it's pretty, we've done it's been a good interview. I guess the only thing I would add is, if you have a gift to give and you want to share it with the youth, I'm always looking for volunteers. I'm always, if this sounds interesting to you, if any of what we've talked about has moved you, or you think you might be interested, get a hold of me. Even if it's making soup or cooking or presenting something or driving a van or any, no job is too small, and they're all equally important. So I just ask anyone who's interested, who wants to get involved, we'll find a place for you.
Oh, great.
All are welcome, including you, Cory.
Well, I'm getting used to my 2 ministries, but that sounds inviting. So
now, three is a holier number than 2.
And then the next thing you'll tell me is 7 is even holier.
I don't think I'd ask anyone to do 7 ministries. No, I wouldn't ask you to do anything quite yet. But at some point, if you feel moved, it would be wonderful. Well, anyone else out there?
Thank you. Yeah, and that's a great invitation for folks, and it is part of my growing journey. Well, I mean, every edge is a growing edge with me, but like working with kids, talking with kids, is sometimes it feels tough. You don't know how to connect, as you said, and staying current is important. Sometimes it's hard, if depending on the age of the kids. It's just about getting experience and seeing what works. Yeah, so I wouldn't mind working with youth more down the line. Thanks for the invitation, Kurt. And I want to share something that Albert shares in parting, that it's so important for the youth to have sacred and safe space to participate in. And so to all of those reflecting on working with Kurt and helping youth out in whatever ways you feel called and is healthy, that reflection on what it means to create safe space is uber important, and I'm sure at the core of a lot of your youth work, Kurt. So I would ask, if you feel like you can help in that regard, whoever you are, then all power to you.
Yes, and if you and offer extends the other way too. If you have some teens, if you know of some teens in a church or local organization or anything that you think has got enough, or you're building critical mass or want to start some kind of a youth league or a youth group in your area, I'm there. Just give me a call. I'm there. It's part of my role in a denomination is to support all the churches and organizations, however need be.
Well, we are so blessed and honored to have you in that role and doing your work so passionately. I hope and know that God will continue to be with you, uplifting your work, your ministry, your spiritual journey. So, I just want to offer up my heart and so many others around this denomination. So many people really, truly appreciate what you do, Kurt. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's always nice to hear those wonderful, kind words. Thank you so much, Cory. And congratulations.
Oh, I guess I should mention it.
Oh, you absolutely.
Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you did it too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you should mention it.
Oh well, I will, because this actually is our first broadcast since Alyssa and I got engaged. This is an engagement ring, folks. Yeah, thanks, Kurt. It's really exciting. I'm so blessed and honored.
I remember.
Yeah. Well, and I never asked. What's that?
It was a long time ago, but I remember.
If I can keep you on for one more minute, I want to ask about that. How's the family? You mentioned your two daughters, your wife.
Great.
How's that going?
Wonderful. Yeah. We're all very happy. I've got a girl in middle school and I've got a daughter in high school. So I'm right in the perfect area, right? They're always telling me what I'm doing wrong.
Oh, perfect.
It's perfect. Yeah, they're correcting me all the time. I think they're both wiser than I am too in many ways. Yeah,
well, yeah, youth tend to be, especially the newer generations, and it's nice having a feedback mechanism just built into the house.
It really is. I'll bounce things off. Every retreat, I bounce things off them. Is this going to fly? Is this okay? And they're like, come on, no, that doesn't work anymore. It's not, no. You're showing your age again, Dad.
Wow, that's cool.
Help. They really do help.
And it probably helps that you don't seem very, defensive and you're willing to hear feedback and things like that.
Oh, no, you can't be defensive in youth work. That's the kiss of death.
Yeah.
You really can't. No, you appreciate everything. The criticism and the critiquing is really, really important in this work. And you really have to hear it and be open to receiving it, or forget it. Give up right now.
Words for all of us to live by, I think. Well, and I appreciate what you said earlier around Swedenborgian theology, speaking to youth life and your life. And I think that's been a big part for me, is the call to be willing to reflect and not be defensive, because none of us are perfect, and we do have infinite room to grow, don't we?
Infinite to eternity.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kurt, and thanks to the rest of you for connecting with us tonight.
Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate being here. It's been a wonderful experience and a blessing.
Well, yeah, we are quite blessed ourselves, and so we would love to have you back on anytime you're wanting, and if not, I'll harangue you in a couple months now.
Happy to come back when, and anything, if you want to just talk about one particular area, or this has kind of been all over the place, and it's a great way to start. But yeah, anything, if you want to know a little more about what our sessions are like, or what we cover, or how we present certain aspects of anything, I'm more than open to and happy to come back and discuss anything that you think your listeners would like to hear.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. Yeah, that's right what we need and what we like. We tend to, get introduced to folks in kind of the spiritual journey. Often it's in their ministry, and it's been cool connecting with you because I feel like you are who you are, and kind of the image of your ministry and your call, I think, just shows up in everything that you do. And so it's just been an honor to get a broad view of what you've shared about your work and your life, Kurt. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you very much. Providence has been very good to me. I'm very blessed in my work and in my life. I can't complain about anything.
That's great. And I hope you all feel the same. This community strives to uplift each other wherever we're at. So hopefully, as we learn from Kurt and from others, we can come together throughout the year in our own type of cyber retreats, supporting each other. So down the line, expect more interviews, expect more services, but I think we're going to take some more time to just connect and share on some of the Thursdays and future months, so we can have a little bit more intimate conversation between us folks here. And so I thank Kurt for the inspiration. I thank you for your own walk. And now go forth, everyone, knowing that you are quite loved. Bye.
Bye.